I swapped a DNA test to protect my brother's family, but now he hates me. I never thought that a single white envelope could destroy an entire life. But that's exactly what happened the day I held my brother's DNA test results in my hands. I'm not a murderer, I'm not a fraud, but sometimes a lie can be worse than a crime, because it forces you to look into the eyes of those you love and smile, knowing that beneath your smile hides a time bomb. My name is Andrew, I'm 34 years old, and it all started about a year and a half ago in the suburbs of London, where life goes on as usual. Identical houses, identical neighbors, identical Sunday dinners. My younger brother James was always the one who succeeded at everything. He had a good job, a beautiful wife named Sophie, and an impeccable reputation as the family's golden boy. And me, I was just his older brother, an engineer, single, too straightforward, and perhaps too honest. Ironic, isn't it? When Sophie announced her pregnancy, the whole family rejoiced. Our parents cried with joy. James beamed like a child. But a couple of months later, a crack appeared in his glow. Rumors were floating around that Sophie had someone else. A colleague, a young, attractive guy from the marketing department. I didn't believe it until James called me himself at 3 in the morning. "Andy, I can't sleep," his voice trembled. "What if the child isn't mine?" "James, you're crazy. Of course it's yours. I need to know. I won't survive if it's not." I didn't know what to say. He was in such a state, as if standing on the edge of a cliff. I saw him clenching his fists, his eyes losing focus. It wasn't just fear, it was panic on the verge of madness. A week later, Sophie gave in to the pleas and agreed to the test. She looked offended but did it for peace in the house. And me, I ended up as the intermediary. The mail, the delivery, the papers, all went through my hands. It so happened that the envelope with the results came to me. And that's when I first felt like I was holding the fate of 3 people in my hands. I didn't want to open it. But James begged, he said. "I can't if it's bad news. Just tell me, prepare me." I opened it. 3 words. 3 simple words that could shatter his life to pieces. Not the biological father. I froze. Then reread it. Then again. Then I just sat on the floor, feeling the world around me lose its sound. Sophie, his perfect wife. Their marriage, their home. And this baby, for whom he'd already bought a teddy bear. I saw it all crumbling right before my eyes, in that moment, with the paper in my hands. I didn't immediately realize what I was about to do. If someone had asked me that day if I planned to lie, I would have said no. But lies rarely start as a plan, more often as a whisper of conscience. Maybe not now, maybe you'll tell the truth later. Only later never comes. I sat in the kitchen with the envelope in my hands as the morning light came through the window. Outside, the mail truck drove by, a dog barked, the usual noise. And in my hands lay a life, like in childhood when you hold a baby bird in your palm. One wrong move and it's all over. I wasn't sure what I was doing, I just didn't want my brother to break. You see, James was always the one keeping the family afloat. After our father's death, he became the man of the house. He took care of our mother, helped me pay off debts, even fixed my car when I was out of work. He's the person who always saves others. And now I saw how he could lose everything. Because of one mistake, because of the woman he idolized. I remember sitting there, staring at those words, not the biological father. It was like someone shot at the wall, and the bullet lodged right in my chest. And I knew if I handed him this sheet, he just wouldn't hold up. He's not the type to get angry. He's the type to break silently. And I'd seen it before, after Dad's accident when James stood by his bed and whispered, "I should have gone instead." That's when I first understood how deeply he takes others' pain as his own. I sat with those thoughts for probably the whole day. The envelope lay in front of me on the table. Next to it, coffee that had long gone cold and the phone ringing every half hour. "Andy, did you get it? What's in there?" I didn't answer, and then I just opened my laptop. Yes, that simple. I typed up a different result, with the phrase, "is the biological father." Printed it, forged the lab stamp, found an image online, matched the font. I'm not proud of it, but at the time it seemed like the right thing. I didn't feel like a criminal, I felt like a brother. A person saving a family while it could still be saved. When I brought the envelope to James, he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Shadows under his eyes, stubble, hands shaking. Sophie sat nearby, silent, scared. I handed over the envelope. He tore it open right on his knees. His eyes darted across the lines until they hit the main part. And then I saw him cry. But they were tears of relief. He hugged Sophie, he laughed, he trembled, repeating, I knew it was my son." She cried too, but those were different tears, I saw it. In them wasn't relief, fear. As if she realized there was no way back now. I stood nearby, feeling everything inside me turning upside down. I had done what seemed worth it all. I saved the family. I saved my brother. But when I got home and closed the door behind me, it hit me. At first quietly, just emptiness. Then came the voice in my head. You didn't save him, you killed the truth. Weeks passed. The child was born, a boy, Oliver. I saw him for the first time in the hospital. Tiny, wrinkled, with huge blue eyes that were not James's. He was the spitting image of that guy. I'd seen his photo on social media, couldn't forget. Sophie tried to avoid my gaze. Every time I came over, she seemed to shrink, as if I reminded her of what happened. James, though, was happy. He carried the baby in his arms, saying that for the first time in his life, he felt like a father. He shone like the sun. And every time I saw that shine, something inside me broke. One day, he invited me to a barbecue. All the neighbors, friends, Sophie's parents. Laughter, music, the smell of meat, children's giggles, it seemed perfect. And only I sat in the corner, watching James hold the baby and say, You know, Andy, I'm grateful to you. Without you, I wouldn't have made it. I forced a smile, but inside something cracked. It wasn't guilt. It was the realization that my lie was now alive. It was growing, laughing, calling him daddy. Almost a year passed. And all that time, I lived in two worlds. In one, I was the beloved uncle, brother, part of a happy family. In the other, I woke up at night in a cold sweat, seeing that envelope in my nightmares. I tried to convince myself that I'd done the right thing. That sometimes a lie is an act of love. That truth isn't always needed if it destroys lives. But deep down I knew it wasn't love, it was fear. Fear of losing a world that was already hanging by a thread. The first warning sign came the day James got sick. Nothing serious, just a cold, but the doctor asked for a blood test. For insurance, for the database, just in case. A week later, Sophie called me. Her voice trembled. Andrew, there's some mistake with the lab. They said that based on the genetic data, James can't be the biological father of the child. It's a mistake, right? I froze. The world narrowed again to the sound of her breathing. You don't think that? Of course it's a mistake, I interrupted. It happens, they mix up samples. I spoke quickly, confidently, like someone trying to convince not her but himself. Sophie fell silent. Then she said quietly, Andrew, I remember you brought the envelope. You didn't do anything. I hung up. From then on, everything started to crumble. Not right away, gradually. Like a crack that's barely visible at first, then spreads across the glass until it shatters. James began noticing that Sophie was acting strangely. He asked me what was going on, and I dodged the answers. He started suspecting that she was lying to him again. And me, I stood between them like someone who once tried to save a bridge, now watching it collapse under his own lie. Sometimes truth doesn't burst out with a shout. It seeps in slowly, like water dripping into the same crack for years until it erodes even stone. And then one day, without warning, everything collapses, not because someone loudly spoke the truth, but because it simply couldn't hide anymore. About 2 weeks after that call from Sophie, I first realized that my lie was starting to live its own life, no longer under my control. James called in the evening, said he wanted to come over. His voice sounded strange, not angry, not anxious, more like burned out, as if something inside him had already died, and now only emptiness remained. He arrived without warning late, when I was already getting ready for bed. It was raining outside, and he stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone with some folder in his hands. I'll never forget his face. Calm, even too calm, like someone who no longer expects excuses or salvation. "I need you to look at this," he said, his voice even almost emotionless. He pulled out several sheets from the folder, medical reports, lab printouts, DNA test confirmations. But these weren't the papers I'd forged back then. These were new ones, done at a different clinic in a different city. They couldn't be mistaken. "They checked 3 times," he said quietly. "There couldn't be any error." He looked up at me, and I realized he already knew. Not just suspected, but knew. And the worst part, I saw that all this time he had trusted me more than her. "I wanted you to tell me yourself," he said, and those words made everything inside me clench. I couldn't breathe in or out. I understood that every word, every movement now would be either the last step toward redemption or another lie that would bury me for good. I lowered my eyes and, for the first time in all this time, told the truth. Yes, I switched the results. He didn't yell. He just stood there looking at me, and in his eyes there was no anger, no pain, only absolute, icy silence that was scarier than any scream. "Why?" he asked finally. I tried to explain something, to say that I wanted to save him, that I didn't want him to break, that I saw how he suffered. But the more I spoke, the clearer it became that it all sounded like a pathetic attempt to justify myself. "You decided for me," he interrupted. "You decided that I couldn't handle the truth, that I'm weaker than you, that I need a lie to live." He spoke quietly, but each word cut deep. "You took away my choice, from me, from him, from everyone." He turned and walked to the door without looking back. Before leaving, he said, "I thought Sophie betrayed me. Turns out it was you." The door slammed, and I was left standing in the darkness, feeling something inside me finally collapse. I don't remember how long I stood there, motionless. Then I just sat on the floor, buried my forehead in my knees, and couldn't breathe for a long time. The following days were like a dream. Sophie called, then stopped. James's mom called once, said shortly, "You did what you did, now live with it," and hung up. It felt like the whole town knew. On the streets, people greeted me as usual, but I saw a question in every glance. "Is that the brother?" I tried to justify myself, told myself that I did it all out of love, that I was saving the family, not destroying it. But the more I repeated it, the less I believed my own words. Because love isn't about control, not about lies. Love is about trust. And I destroyed exactly that. A couple of weeks later, James left. He left Sophie, filed for divorce, took his things and the child with him, not to punish her, but to save the boy from the scandals flaring up between them. He said he wasn't sure whose son Oliver was, but now it didn't matter. He would raise him because the child wasn't to blame. Those words hit me the hardest for some reason. He could forgive a stranger's child, but not me. And I couldn't blame him for that. I tried to talk to him several times, but he didn't answer calls, didn't open the door. When I finally went to his house one day, he just said, "Andy, leave. We both know you didn't mean harm, but what you did can't be fixed." He stood on the threshold, and behind him, Oliver, that same boy, now a bit older, with those same blue eyes that always reminded me that lies have a face. I looked at the child, then at James, and realized that now there was an abyss between us that couldn't be jumped. I left without saying goodbye. A year passed. I moved, changed jobs, tried to start over. But some things don't let go. You can change cities, phone numbers, even your name, but you can't escape who you are. Sometimes I look at old photos of me and James, how we built forts as kids, rode bikes, how he got me out of trouble, how I promised I'd always be there. And I realize that the scariest thing in this story isn't even that I lied. It's that I betrayed the one person who believed in me unconditionally. Recently, I ran into Sophie by chance. She looked exhausted but calm. We stood in the supermarket, awkwardly glanced at each other. Then she approached and said, "He knows you meant well, he just can't accept it." I nodded, not knowing what to say. She looked at me, sighed, and added, "And I'm probably grateful to you, because if not for you, it would have ended even worse." She turned and left, and I stood there, feeling a strange sensation. Not relief, not forgiveness, but the realization that sometimes in saving someone, you become the cause of destruction yourself. Now I live alone. I'm writing this story not so someone pities me or justifies me. I just want someone reading this to understand truth, no matter what it is always better than a lie. A lie can give you a breather, but it always comes back, not as paper in an envelope, but as emptiness inside that nothing can fill. I don't know if my brother will ever forgive me. Maybe not. But if one day he reads this, I want him to know. I did it not out of malice, not out of pride, but out of fear of losing him. And it was that fear that cost me everything. 5 years is a whole lifetime if you're living with guilt. Every morning you wake up feeling like someone is sitting on your chest, breathing heavily, and you can't shake them off. At first you fight it, then you get used to it, then you just learn to live with it, like pain in an old fracture that aches only in bad weather but never fully goes away. I haven't spoken to James all these years. Not because I didn't try, but because I didn't know how. Any message, any letter seemed either too banal or too late. What can you write to someone whose trust you destroyed? Sorry, too little. I miss you, too selfish. I need you doesn't make sense anymore if you're not waited for. I left Manchester and moved to Leeds. There I got a job at a small publishing house, printing books by unknown authors and old poetry collections. The work was quiet, almost monastic, and that's probably what I needed then. Day after day I lived in that rhythm, coffee, editing, silence, night. Sometimes in the evenings, I'd put on old music and think that maybe this is what redemption looks like. Not through big gestures, but through small, quiet actions that no one notices. But the past doesn't know how to stay silent. It always finds a way to return, not as loud news or calls, but through random coincidences. One day, late autumn, I was walking through the park and heard someone call, "Mr. Carter." I turned around. Standing before me was a boy of about 8 or 9, with tousled blonde hair and huge blue eyes. I immediately knew who it was, even before he said, "You're my dad's brother, right?" I didn't know how to react. Oliver had grown. Now there was less of Sophie in him and more of James, especially in the smile. I felt everything inside me clench from old pain and sudden tenderness. "Yes," I said quietly, "I guess so." He smiled in that childishly sincere way. Dad said you used to be best friends. Why don't you talk anymore? I froze. Words stuck in my throat. How do you explain to a child that adults sometimes break things that can't be fixed, even if they didn't mean harm? It's a complicated story, I managed. We fought because of a mistake. Because of Mom, he asked directly, and I realized James hadn't hidden the past from him after all, but apparently told it more gently than he could have. I nodded. Yes, because of adults who did stupid things. He thought for a second, then said, Dad said everyone does stupid things sometimes. The important thing is to try to fix them afterward. Those words hit me like electricity. I stood there looking at him and realized, here it was, the chance I didn't deserve, but life decided to give me anyway. Not to bring back the old, but to at least balance the scales a bit. We talked a little more, about school, his dog, his soccer team. Before leaving, he suddenly said, Dad isn't mad at you. He's just sad when he remembers you. And he left, leaving me standing in the middle of the autumn park under the drizzling rain, with the feeling that the world had just shifted slightly, not in my favor, but at least toward truth. After that, I couldn't find peace for several days. I paced the apartment like a cage, realizing that if I didn't try one more time, I'd stay in this limbo forever. So I sat down, took out an old notebook and started writing. Not a letter, not an apology. A story. I wrote about how it all began. How I saw James crumbling under the weight of betrayal, and how I got scared I'd lose him. About how I forged the results, convinced I was doing good. About how that good turned to poison. I didn't justify myself, just told it as it was. When I finished, it was over 30 pages. I printed it, put it in an envelope and sent it. No signature, no return address. Just a short note, this is the truth, do with it what you want. A month passed. Then a second. No response. I had already decided the letter was lost, or more likely, just thrown away. But one evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. James stood on the threshold, the same but different. Gray at the temples, tired eyes, but without that anger I remembered. He held my envelope in his hands, crumpled, with a coffee stain on the edge. I read it, he said, several times. We were silent for a long time. He came inside, sat down, and between us hung that sacred silence. Not because it's pleasant, because in it lives everything that doesn't need to be said in words anymore. I hated you, he said finally, thought I'd never forgive. But then I realized, you were just scared, just like I was scared of the truth back then. And probably, if I'd been in your place, I don't know if I'd have done differently. He looked up at me and smiled for the first time in so many years. We've both lost too much, maybe enough. I couldn't answer, just nodded. A lump in my throat, and the only thing I could say was, thank you. He stood up, about to leave. At the door, he turned and added, Oliver wants to see you, come by sometime, but no explanations, just as an uncle. When the door closed behind him, I sat on the floor, like that night long ago, but now I cried not from pain, but from that strange feeling that comes only after true redemption. It's not like happiness. It's quieter, heavier, but purer. Since then, I visit them sometimes. Not often, not intrusively. Just on weekends, help Oliver with homework, teach him to assemble old radios. James doesn't talk about the past, and neither do I. We just live. Sometimes, when he goes to make tea, I look at Sophie's photo on the shelf and think that maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Maybe sometimes a lie really can save, but only if you're ready to pay the full price for the truth afterward. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. It's not everything's fine, but I remember, but I choose to live on. And probably that's what I finally understood. I'm not the one who switched the test. I'm the one who admitted it and learned not to hide behind excuses. Sometimes I think if I could turn back time, I'd do it differently. But maybe it was this fall that made me into a person capable of loving without fear. And if that's the price of redemption, I'm ready to pay it for the rest of my life. February 15. Rain has been falling since morning, quiet, sticky, as if someone up above decided to wash away the remnants of winter, but isn't in a hurry. I sit at the table, the same one from my old apartment in Manchester, and for the first time in many years I picked up a pen not for work, but just to write. A letter to you, James. Though honestly, I'm not sure if I really plan to send it. Maybe it's just for me, not as a way to reach out, but as a way to free myself. You know, sometimes I catch myself thinking that I don't remember how it all started. Not the act itself, but that exact moment where everything went wrong. When fear became stronger than love. When the desire to protect became the desire to control. When a lie seemed like the lesser evil than truth. Maybe it happened that evening when you first said you weren't sure Oliver was your son. I saw everything in you collapsing, and I couldn't bear it. I told myself, I have to help. I didn't mean harm. I just wanted you not to suffer. And then I suddenly realized that I'd turned you into someone living not with pain, but with deception. And maybe that's even worse. I've thought a lot about this in recent years. About how sometimes love and fear go hand in hand. We love and fear losing. We protect and maim. We lie with the best intentions. But that's no excuse. I don't seek excuses anymore. I just want you to know I understood. Your pain isn't my fault back then. It's my responsibility for the rest of my life. And I'm not trying to escape it. You said I was just scared. You were right. But I'm not scared anymore. When I see Oliver growing, how he smiles, how he looks at you, I understand that life still found a way to restore balance. You became the father you always wanted to be. And maybe what I destroyed back then, the world rebuilt differently, not by my will, but perhaps even better that way. I'm not asking you to call me brother again someday. Not asking for trust. Not asking for the past. I'm just grateful that we now have the present. That you let me be around Oliver. That when we sit in the kitchen and he tells his childish stories, you don't look away. That's forgiveness, not words but silent permission to stay. If you're reading this letter, it means I decided to send it after all. If not, it'll stay here in the notebook, where I keep what can't be said anymore. But maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's for me. Because for the first time in many years, I don't feel the weight on my chest. Not because the pain is gone, but because I finally stopped fighting it. I accepted it as part of myself. Maybe that's what redemption is. Not in receiving forgiveness, but in learning to live worthy of the one you once betrayed. I step out onto the balcony. The rain has almost stopped. The air smells of wet wood and earth, as if everything around is preparing for spring. And for the first time in many years, I allow myself to smile. Without fear, without guilt, just because I'm alive.